from Prague, BTC Prague. I am live here with the first edition of Smarter Web Wednesdays with the CEO, Andrew Webley of the company, Smarter Web Company, which is an absolute rocket ship of a leveraged Bitcoin equity coming out of UK. Andrew, good to see you. Thank you for doing this on short notice. It was memed into reality by at 80IQ Genius on X, and I'm just loving that we can do stuff impulsively here. Welcome to the show. It's good seeing you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I've had another busy day. Like yesterday was an intense day. Every day's pretty intense at the moment, to be honest with you. But so far so good. Heading in the right direction, and we're doing our best.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we should talk about just real quick, you say you have a busy day today. Let's take a quick look at the SWC share price today. So I felt FOMO for a while, and then yesterday I finally got a tiny bag, aped in at $4.19, and then I saw this. Like, this is not the monthly chart. This is from today, up 47%. Well done, Andrew. How are you pulling this off?
Well, so we listed the business 2 months ago. The way it came into reality was, I invested in strategy probably, I don't know, almost 5 years ago now. And I thought it was the best thing ever. A public company. I used to run the online side of the biggest investment broker in the UK, so I understand investing to a degree. I got involved in Bitcoin almost 10 years ago, and I then found MicroStrategy, now Strategy, and thought it was awesome. So, then what happened was I couldn't find anything in the UK that was similar, an operating business with a Bitcoin treasury policy. So I kept looking and looking and looking, and I couldn't find anything. And then last year I finally bit the bullet, and I thought, well, if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. So we listed the business. We got everything. We worked really, really hard from sort of December, January. 7 days a week, long days. To get to that point in April. Like, when you IPO a company, a lot of people don't understand the work that goes into that. We did it in about 4 months, and everyone tells me that's pretty quick, but it's still 4 months of hard work. And then we got listed. We were confident in our strategy, and then I guess the public embraced us, because the markets need to. It's a bit like a voting machine, I suppose. The market needs to give you their endorsement, which then allows you to generate further capital from the market and then to grow the business. So, the market's got behind us. We announced a raise that we did the other day. We raised almost £30 million, in 4 hours, something like that. So it was pretty awesome. If you think that when we IPO'd at, a couple of £1 million, our market cap, and then last Friday evening we raised, most people go home on a Friday evening, right? But we still raised, that quantity of money in that time, only 2 months after listing. So yeah, we're just working hard. We're trying to make sure that everyone understands what we're doing, and it seems to be working.
Well, so far so good. Absolutely, for sure. So when exactly was the listing? How many weeks have you now been live as an active LPE?
Yeah, so it's probably 7 weeks. It's less than 2 months. So we're not even at the 2-month milestone yet. When we started, we were confident. We had the same strategies we've got now. It's just a bit bigger now and a bit more aggressive, I suppose, in terms of the acceleration. But yeah, it's 7 weeks, so that's not that long.
Yeah, and it's not, and I guess that's why I personally we're staying on the sideline, because if you come off, you start with a single-digit amount of Bitcoin, it's easier to go vertical, obviously. But kept seeing you guys going up in a straight line, and I had too much FOMO, had to own some. But you said something interesting. You say you're able to accelerate. Like, how is in terms of even the speed. So are you saying you feel that is the BDC yield increasing, or it's the increase is bigger because you are bigger?
Yeah, so if you look at the capital raises that we've done today, every single capital raise has been at a higher price, and it's been for a larger amount. So that allows you to grow the assets within the business quicker because they're accelerating. Now, the reliance there is that you've got access to capital. You can generate capital, whether that's an equity raise or something else, at accreditative terms for the shareholders, who are in the business. So, if you look at some of the big examples out there, like Metaplanet, so we share a director with Metaplanet, Tyler Evans. What they do really, really well, in the same way that strategy does it so well, is they have access to capital. People think that they're doing a good job, so they give them capital, however that's structured, whether it's equity, debt, pref shares, whatever. And that is how you accelerate. So you can keep acquiring, in our case, Bitcoin, because we believe that Bitcoin is the very best asset in the world. So that's how we run our corporate treasury policy alongside the operating business. And as long as you've got access to that capital, then you can keep accelerating. If you look at some of the metrics out there, so a lot of people talk about days to cover, and you look at some of these metrics that are, they're all available online, and you can see that we are the quickest, fastest company in the world that's adopting a Bitcoin treasury strategy at the moment. Now, if you look purely in the UK, you can see we're the best performing UK equity this year by far. We're listed on the smaller exchange in the UK. We've got 2 exchanges in the UK. We've got the London Stock Exchange and Aquis. We're by far the biggest company on Aquis. Now after less than 2 months, I think we're probably twice the size of the next smallest company that's probably been there for years. And it's all about access to capital at the end of the day. And to get capital, you need to think about, without stating the obvious, where this capital is going to come from, and a key part of that is, are you delivering on your strategy and in all the different areas? So, is the management working hard enough? Are you executing the strategy properly? All of these things are so important, because otherwise, if you don't do those things, you won't get access to capital over the long term. It's great that things are going so well in this first 2 months, but for me, it's about where we are within a year, 2 years, 3 years. This is a long-term mission, and it's my job just to sort of stick to that mission, from how it started. It hasn't changed.
No. And so when you say accelerate, would that mean that the capital raises you do, are they a bigger percentage of your size as you are now than they were initially? Are you taking on big, like the percentage you're taking in is bigger?
Yeah, well, so this is the great thing about it. So if you look at the capital raises that we've done, they've got bigger, but because they're on better terms, i.e. a better price, because this is just straight equity, so it's more simple than some of the more complex instruments. So you're doing bigger raises at a better price. So the actual dilution to the existing shareholders when you bring that new capital in is quite minimal. So the one that we did, at the weekend just gone, we bought 30 million pounds approximately of new capital in the business, and I believe it was about a 7, maybe an 8% dilution for the shareholders. So what we actually did with that raise is we effectively doubled the size of our treasury by doing that raise. So we doubled the size of the treasury and we diluted shareholders by, let's call it 7%. So it's pretty good if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because let's pretend you own 1 share in the company. Your 1 share is 7% less of the whole company as it was before. But the capital is twice as big. So that is true value generation, really.
Absolutely. Well, that sounds good. What was the question I was thinking of? Yeah. So as invest, like I started doing this show, MicroStrategy Mondays, back in September, October. I think it was early October. Then I started doing MetaPlanet, a roundtable, because MetaPlanet is absolutely killing it, and have done so for a long time now. And here we are with Smarter Web Wednesdays as well. I find this extremely interesting. What was my yeah. So my question is, because a lot of guys like me looking at this, and girls, we look at different websites to find out what is the MNAV now. And the share price is easy to find, but sometimes it takes a little time, I guess, to update the amount of shares in the company and Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Where's the one I have been looking at for SWC is the smarterinvestmentguy.com. But where do you recommend to look at data for SWC?
Yeah, so we're really lucky. We've got an excellent community that's grown up organically on X. I think there's 1,100, 1,200 members, something. It's growing at
2,100 now, I can tell you, Andrew.
Yeah. So it's growing at a hell of a rate. It's great. And obviously the days are pretty intense, but I try and check in there and see what everyone's saying, because we want everyone's comments and feedback to be incorporated. But within there, you've got someone called Nick B, and he created this thing that he called the Webley tracker at the start, which was pretty cool to see when we were just getting started. But then he's built it out into this whole dashboard. And he's really smart, he's really quick, it gets updated. We put something out, within the day it's updated. So I would definitely recommend having a look there. It's brilliant. I'm a developer myself, and it's something that if I coded that, I would be very proud of that. And it's great because it's all community led, you see. So the great thing about the Smarter Web Company now is the support and the community, and seeing all of those ideas. My job as the CEO is very simple, really. It's just to stick to the mission, to listen to what people are saying, and cherry pick all the best ideas and whack them into the strategy too. I've got the easy job. It's the community that's doing the hard work.
It's not an easy job, but you're killing it. So that's awesome. Being a leader is not easy, but it's good to see you killing it. And we spoke about that also in the green room before you started. You are a programmer yourself. How does that play into how you're pulling this off or managing SWC?
Yeah, so I think most programmers, programming is a bit like doing a puzzle. So you've got to put something together, in the vision that you see. So, I've run my own business for 15 years. I used to run the online side of Hargreaves Lansdown. I did that for 10 years. That was a very entrepreneurial company, and it grew to be one of the 100 biggest companies in the UK. So, for 25 years, my whole career has been programming and entrepreneurial, related things. And I think when you put those things together, if you believe in something and you've got a vision that you've come up with, then you just follow it. We have to give maximum respect to people like Saylor from Strategy and Simon from MetaPlanet, and all these other great companies that are doing a very, very similar thing in different geographic regions, because without them taking the lead and inspiring people to do things, it would be that much harder. When I listed our business on the stock market, it was a lot of people didn't see the potential. Obviously I've been investing in the pure space, i.e. not just Bitcoin, but public companies adopting Bitcoin for, almost 5 years. And, I think I hold about 6 at the moment of them. I believed in it, and I knew that there was a good market for it. Obviously there is, because it's been very well embraced, but the programming sort of mentality of problem solving and getting something done, especially when a lot of programmers we work in sort of like a rapid application development type environment. So the concept there is that you don't do a project, you have a period of time and you do something in the period of time. So if you think about that running a business, or being the CEO or what have you, then, I believe in continuous improvement. So I want to get stuff done every single day wherever possible. So, that sort of, constant grinding away at something to get better and better and better is, it probably plays into the role and the mission quite well.
Right. Makes sense. So someone told me that you are in particularly raising funds from the institutional side. Is that the case? And if yes, um, why is that? Because we're seeing, I guess, for instance, MetaPlanet is mainly doing a similar to ATM strategy through moving strike warrants, I believe they're called. Please tell me, how do you raise your funds to buy more
Yes,
Bitcoin?
so as we're talking today, obviously I can't talk about anything that would happen in the future
Of
potentially.
course.
But as we're talking today, what we've done, so we've done one thing that's a bit different, and that is we have raised money from retail investors right from the start. So, I'm a retail investor, and I wanted this to be accessible to retail investors. So every single raise that we did from the start until the last one that we did, we always gave an allocation to retail investors, and we let them have basically as much as they wanted from those raises. And then alongside the retail book, we also built the institutional book, which has been growing and growing and growing every time. Now, in the UK, you have a restriction of the capital that you can raise doing it in that particular way in a year. And we actually got to that limit. So there's a different way that you can raise money from retail investors, or a couple of different ways actually, which we'll look at in the future. But there's other solutions as well that we can look at, to allow them. But importantly, what we've done as a company to date, and I hope forever, but obviously I can't guarantee that, is we've never raised money at a discount. So we've always raised money at the market price. So the market closed 4:30 on Friday. We announced the raise, immediately after that we were going to start it, and we did it at the closing price. So we've always raised money at the market price. So what that means is that if people are buying or selling the shares, obviously it's a little bit volatile, because that's the nature of these sorts of things. But people can buy the shares, and they know that, if the market closed then and we were going to do a raise then, the chances are, it would be the same price. It's not doing it with a discount or anything like that. Now, obviously, as that changes over time, you might do certain things where you might even do raises at a premium, but as debt, for example. But there's all sorts of solutions that, I can't really talk about right now, of how you can do different things, which are really, really smart. And then, let's say we do some of those, then, I can talk about those in the future, but obviously right now I can't say any more about, that side of things.
Of course. Yeah, no, totally understand. You can only share what you can share. But very exciting. What do you see as, because you're not alone in UK? There's, I believe, 3 leveraged Bitcoin equities in UK. Japan, they're alone. In US, there's a dozen outside of strategy themselves. So what do you consider your core strengths, and what do you rely on to be able to in the future outperform? What sets you apart?
Yes, it's a great question. So, as we're talking right now, I think there's probably 7 or 8 smaller companies that have all come up with, a similar sort of thing, at very different stages. I think there's one of them that, it's probably got a very good chance. They're doing really well at the moment. I know one of the guys there, not well, but I've met him, and I think they're doing a good job. I'm watching that one keenly to see how that one plays out. The other ones in the UK, they're incredibly early. So, I'm not one to judge anyone or any company. I will judge them by their actions. So, I'm interested to see what they do. If they can execute the strategy properly, or as I think it should be executed, then, I'll be really interested to follow their journeys. I think it's probably too early at the moment. And by that I mean, they've said that they're going to adopt a certain treasury policy, but I'm not sure that they have. That side of things. I think if you purely look at us, I think if you invest in anything, it doesn't have to be this type of company, but any company, you have to look at that company and you have to think, right, what do I like about it? And, do I believe that they're doing it in the way that it, whatever should be done? And I think when people look at us, they can see that, we're hardworking, we're honest, we're transparent, we're aligned. By far my personal wealth is all tied up in the business. So I need to make it work for my family in addition to all the shareholders, right? So I think they can look at that side of things and they can see we're all aligned. Like this morning, for example, we announced a new hire, Jesse Myers, really well respected, great knowledgeable guy. He's almost paying us to work for us, so he's got a salary. It's all in the announcement. But he invested almost £1 million in the company in the fundraising that we just did. That's alignment. That's what we want. All of the directors hold shares in the company. They've all paid for those shares, whether it was with cash or some of them for services, i.e. they didn't get paid cash for the time that they worked. We haven't got, at the moment, we haven't got any, we haven't even got a staff option scheme, because literally we're all in the same boat as the shareholders in that regard. And I think that's really, really important. And then I think what people need to do, and we're still early, obviously, in the first 2 months, but I think they need to just look at how companies deliver that strategy. If that strategy is being delivered sincerely, properly, dare I say aggressively, then I think people can see, the great thing about a company that's adopting Bitcoin on the balance sheet is that it's actually pretty easy to work out if they're doing what they say they should be doing. You can look at, are they communicating their holdings with us? We've communicated our holdings pretty much every week. We've said, in fact, some weeks we've said twice, what we've been deploying, if it's significant enough to warrant that announcement. I think people just need to look at what they're doing. I wanted to list my business on the stock market because I wanted something like this to invest in. So as long as I stick to that mission and that approach, which I will do because I've done that, that same way of working for 25 years, then, hopefully we can keep growing and growing and growing. And I want us to be one of the biggest companies in the UK. I won't put a timescale on it. If someone had said to me that within the first 2 months you would be the biggest, probably twice as big as the next size company on the Aquis Stock Exchange, I'd tell them to stop winding me up. So when I say that I want to be in the FTSE 100 without setting a time on that, then that is my goal. And then after that, who knows where we go.
Yeah, absolutely. That should be a matter of time. I've stayed away from investing in stocks for a long time after discovering Bitcoin because nothing outperformed Bitcoin until Sailor and Strategy, used to be MicroStrategy, invented the effective Bitcoin flywheel and the ability to use these financial instruments, and in my opinion, really build an aqueduct from, if you think about the Roman Empire, from all that yield-starving capital in the financial legacy or the legacy financial system, and it flows right over to Bitcoin through these different instruments, and it's the owners of the companies. Like you are an owner of an aqueduct in UK between the legacy finance system and into Bitcoin. If you own the aqueduct, you're making profit as that capital is flowing to the higher yield. So that's very exciting. So there is a question from Adrian in the chat. Are you doing proof of reserves, or is that something you are planning on doing?
Yeah, so I went to London yesterday to go and meet some people, do a talk, and then I went to a really good event in the evening, Bitcoin Surrey. That was great. We had a chat for about an hour and a half. Can't remember how long it was. And there were loads of questions there. One of the questions that was raised at the end was that same question. And I gave, like I would answer any question, I gave a very honest answer. So I am not decided yet whether we will do that. So part of me thinks that people should trust us. If you want to buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. If you want to buy securitized Bitcoin, buy our stock or another one. I actually stole that line off Michael Saylor, by the way. So that's part of me thinks that. The other part of me goes back to everything that we stand for, which is transparency and trust. So, I can't give you an answer to that at the moment. What I can say is we don't do it at the moment. We may do it in the future. The thing that concerns me about it is that in the UK, we've got a regulatory responsibility to communicate stuff to the market before anyone else. So it's a level playing field, right? So you can only announce something to everyone, and then you can talk about it. So, if you think about, buying Bitcoin, if you're buying Bitcoin, say, today, tomorrow, the next day, whatever, and then you're buying a certain amount before you update the market with your current treasury policy, it does get a bit more complicated. If you think about wallet addresses and, even if you change the wallet address every single time, it's just getting a bit harder to manage that. Now, that's a bit of a bad excuse in a way, because like everything, it can be overcome. But whilst I understand the question, I also think that people need to trust the management. If you don't trust the management, because you've got to remember that we're audited. The financial markets are incredibly regulated. I say to people, there's a form for everything, and then there's 10 forms for that form. So I understand the question, and it's a bit of a long answer, but I'm undecided.
Right. No, I hear you. Well, I'm glad you're still undecided, because what I'm hearing people like, I try to, as an investor myself, look into all these things. What's important? Where do I put my own money? And an argument on the other side is, well, Enron was also audited, right? And in US with the SEC and the big four, whatever, auditing companies, and everything was Gucci except it wasn't. So, and in terms of I understand, like, if you were selling Bitcoin, which I'm sure you're planning to never do, but if you were, and then people could see on the addresses that it's moving away before you're actually sending the press release, that would be a problem. But if you're buying Bitcoin, you can press release it first and then say, oh, and this is the UTXO it's at. I'm just thinking out loud here, Andrew. It's in your hands. But
my gut feeling is that not in the next few weeks, but maybe in the next 3 to 6 months, we will do it, because it does tie in with the transparency side of things. And again, if we look at why does this model work, it's because people have lost trust in most companies. Because, to be blunt about it, purely talking about the UK, most companies are rubbish. So there's all this capital that is looking for a home to go, and they, lots of people see the potential of Bitcoin. So they like a company that adopts Bitcoin as its primary treasury reserve asset. But then with that, you've got the trust that's got to go alongside it. So, I would imagine that we will end up doing it, but I wouldn't want to say that 100%, because then if I don't do it, then I've sort of caused a problem, But I understand the sort of the pros and the cons.
I know you do. And I know you can't say anything here that you haven't press released to the stock exchange first. So all makes a lot of sense. One thing I believe David Bailey has been talking about a UTXO premium, so that the companies that UTXO management are helping with best practices. They're involved in a bunch of LBs around the world, including MetaPlanet. But then, as an investor, again, I don't really see that being branded very much. So you're a couple, like, I don't personally know. There's I believe 3 LBs in UK right now. I know that you are part of the UTXO family. I don't know if the others are. The way I see it, it would probably be a stamp of approval, or will give some trustworthiness to communicate that. Is that something that we'll see, or is it just going to be organic like it is now, but then people don't necessarily know it?
Yeah, so you're right. Actually, I think we do need to make more of that. So if you look at Nakamoto, the idea is that there'll be a Bitcoin treasury company, or similar, in every market, one. And obviously we are the UK, the UK company there. I think you'll see things that we do together in the future that will make that more obvious. I think there's things that they could do that will make that more obvious. It's a good strategy because what you've got to. So I met Tyler last year. Tyler's David's business partner, and that's why I invited Tyler to join the board of our company. We speak almost every day, and he's been incredibly supportive. A really bright guy, very, very successful, and understands the model better than most. He and a few others actually implemented the strategy at Metaplanet when it started. So he's been there, seen it, done it, kind of a thing. Now, I think what you'll probably see as time goes on that there'll be more in more markets. But if you think about it, there isn't any point in having more than one in a market. What you need to do is you need to find local operators. So me in the UK, for example, Simon in Japan, etc., that understand their markets, that can take the because the capital markets they've got lots of similarities globally, but things like regulation, funding, and things, they're ever so slightly different in different countries. So you really need to be in that country. If you said to me, let's take Italy, for example, go to Italy, Andrew, here's a shell, do your thing. There's a bit more to it than that. It would be quite difficult to do that. Obviously, if you were working with someone locally that could do my job in Italy, I could support them. But you need to have those operators that absolutely love everything about the model. They love Bitcoin. They love whatever the operational business is doing, and then they can drive that forward. So I think you are right that maybe there could be a bit more visibility there, but they're doing a great job supporting us. If you look at the presentations that they've done, when they raised all the money, you can see that they've got the map with us in there, and maybe that's part of the fun of it as well. That investors is a bit like Bitcoin, right? So the more time that you put into learning about something, the better you do. Yeah. So the more time you put into Bitcoin, the more likely you will buy more of it. Therefore, everything else being equal, the more likely you do. So maybe this is fair with Bitcoin treasury companies. The more you research them, the more you understand them, the more of a long-term view that you take, the better you do. So maybe that's also part of the answer.
Right. Interesting. Well, I definitely think a lot of it comes down to I think it's to my advantage that I'm really looking at this as an investor of like, where would I like to put my money in this extremely exciting place to invest. I mean, it's financial history that we are watching. Not only the first time we see a monetary base layer revolution in 3,000-4,000 years, but also what's happening right now within finance because of LBs. And I'm thinking, to me, like being.
I completely agree. So I went to.
Go ahead. Or so anything that gives me a higher level of faith in a particular company's future means it's more likely that I invest, right? Or maybe I invest a little bit more and not less. And like, two things for me that I like would be, well, if Nakamoto, like if that's the brand that will be associated with the UTXO management, I know it's the listed company. Knowing that, it's like, okay, there's the international knowledge network that is helping out this company. Okay, that's a thumbs up. Proof of reserves, that's a thumbs up. But yeah, it all makes sense. I'm sure I want to show you a graph. There's so many graphs. I'm sure you've seen this one before. Let me just get this one. I'm pretty sure you've seen this before, Andrew, right? If not, I'll have.
Yeah. So this is this is an awesome graph. and this is the graph when I say that we're the fastest Bitcoin treasury company in the world, which is a bit of an unfair comment in a way, because, obviously some of them are much bigger. But this is the graph that I'm thinking of when I look at that, in addition to, the days to cover. And you can see we're vertical almost, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's but that's also, I think, the thing that people don't talk about when they see that is they don't talk about the way that we raise capital. And obviously we can only talk up to this point in, where are we, like Wednesday night now. But if you look before this point in time, you can see that the way that we've generated the capital, the amounts that we've generated, how we've deployed it, and all those other things, you can see that has allowed that path. So I think somebody, what they should probably do is they should think, well, they've got off to a pretty good start. Do we have faith that they've got, a plan on how they're going to get from, X to 2X, 10X, 20X, 40X, whatever the numbers are. It's just making those numbers up. That's the key thing. If you look at, whether you're looking at, so Metaplanet, great example. You look at Metaplanet. So I'd have a lovely message from them on Sunday morning. And then, I see the announcement on Sunday night, Monday morning, that they've gone from 8 whatever to, 10,000 Bitcoin. And so they've added 1,000 Bitcoin. So when you're that size and you can add that much Bitcoin, that is pure impressive performance. So, if you're looking at a company like us at our size, you've got to think, right, okay, obviously, going pretty well so far, but, how are they going to do that? And you need, as an investor, you need to have confidence that the management has, got a plan, and then can execute that plan, because, without being rude to, my smaller competitors in the UK, anyone can set up a Bitcoin treasury company, and say that they're going to do it. But can you execute it, over a period of time with the pace, that it needs? I work very, very hard on everything that we've got to do. And it takes a lot of commitment. You've really got to believe in it to do it. So, but you also need capital, and you need to be smart about how you can raise that capital. So that's the thing that people need to look at, in my opinion. But I'm very proud of that chart. It's really cool.
You and H100 in Sweden are very vertical, and of course, it's rational thinking, and that, right, when you start small, you can be vertical, and then what happens? But then you look at Metaplanet and the curve that they achieved, the angle, the very aggressive BTC yield. They've been able to keep that up. So, I mean, I will personally be very excited to follow you guys, since, as I tweeted out, got a tiny bag yesterday. And thank you for the, what is it? Just checking the price, 47% up today. Pretty impressive. But what's your expectations in terms of what is realistic in terms of BTC yield? It's very hard to say anything, but
yeah. So I'll answer that question in a different way,
absolutely,
if I may. That so Tyler and I, when we started this, we thought that it would be nice to beat Metaplanet. They went from 0 to 1,000 Bitcoin in 6 months. I've always said to myself that I want to do it in 4 months. I'm pretty confident that I'll do it, a fair bit quicker than that. If you look at, using publicly available information, that the cash and the Bitcoin that we've got within our treasury, you could convert that into, let's say, I don't know, somewhere between 650 and 750 Bitcoin. So you can see that we're on that path to 1,000 Bitcoin. Now, if I can do that path in, a quicker timescale than my own personal targets, then that's a good thing. And then it's, where do we go from there? What are we targeting next? 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Because clearly I'll have to have something to aim for once I've got through that particular target. I haven't worked out what that number will be yet. But it really is a simple case of thinking about the capital and thinking about the investors, and do they want to support you, and can you make that work over the long term? For me, I've had loads of people, and it's amazing. Like last night at this event, I had many people come up to me and say that we've changed their lives. They paid off their mortgages, they've got married, they've gone on holiday, bought a new car, all that sort of amazing, wonderful things, which if I'm honest, when I set this up, I wasn't expecting that. I just didn't think about that. I hoped that people would do really well, but I never expected someone to come up to me and say that, and it means a lot. But for me personally, I need this to work for 1, 3, 5, 10, 15 years, and that's what I'm focused on, and I think I can do it.
No, it's looking good, and I think you can as well, and it looks like it so far. So very good. So how many Bitcoin do you hold right now on the balance sheet, you said, and what extra capital do you have available that you will be smash buying Bitcoin for with the current capital raise?
Yes, it's a bit of a tricky one for me to answer that one. Using publicly available information, we have just over 242 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. We announced that, I believe it was last Friday morning. If you look at using publicly available information, if you look at the combined size of our treasury pot, you can get to the numbers, and you can get to that number somewhere between 650 and 750 approximately. Let's call it 700, i.e. in the middle. And you can see that clear path.
By what time frame you said?
Well, historically, we haven't really sat on cash for more than 2 weeks, historically, or thereabouts. There's no reason to sort of expect anything too different now. And I think that's quite good. But what you also have to factor in mind, and this is a really important thing that people need to think about when they're picking whichever Bitcoin treasury companies they invest in. As I say, I hold 6, 7 if you include us. What you need to think about is well, it depends on your timescales, right? So you can pick something as a gamble for the day, and it might win, might not win. Very difficult to do, but you can do that. If you want to invest for a period of time, then you need to think about the other things in the business. So if you look at our business, we've been profitable for 15 years as an operating business. That doesn't mean to say that we'll be profitable in the future, but certainly it's very, or it could be likely. I can't say that we would be profitable or we won't be profitable, because that isn't allowed either. But if you've got a business that generates cash, then that means that business, say for example, you get a real downturn, and either your share price comes off so that you don't want to raise capital, or even worse, you can't raise capital for whatever reason. If you are purely focused on that, then who's going to pay the insurance, the stock market listing fees, the staff fees, and all that? Whereas with our business, because it's a growing operating business, that means that and there will be a downturn at some point, because that's the way these things work. We'll be okay to weather that storm without tapping in to things if we don't want to. So I think that's quite important for people to think about as well.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. You said earlier it's pretty exciting right now, and I'm thinking that you also mentioned family. I mean, outside of getting family, is this the most exciting period in your life?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this the other day, actually, and in my career, I've sort of enjoyed 3 things the most. So I enjoyed the early days at HL because it was exciting. We were growing at a tremendous rate, and I was young as well, and all of that sort of stuff. It was fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. I learned a lot about the culture of what I believe a good business should be, and all these things. And then when I set up the Smarter Web company, I absolutely loved that as well. That was so exciting. We built a really good system that we use to deliver everything. That's really important because, that's how we make our money. We were growing, and we were signing up all these clients at a different rate and things, and it was just really exciting. We were tweaking the things that we offer, the price points, all that stuff. It was cool. And then this is the third thing, listing the business on the stock market and seeing people really get behind it. If I had to sort of pick one of those three things, then clearly this is the winner. Because this has just been awesome. I'm so lucky to be part of it. And it's really great. I'm speaking to people like you, and I'm speaking to shareholders, and people are getting in touch with me. We won't say who, and saying come and meet with me and all this cool stuff. And it's you almost have to pinch yourself. This is the truth. Yeah. For the last couple of days, I've been saying to myself, surely today can't be better than yesterday, in terms of, I'm not talking about share price here. I'm just talking about the excitement of what's happening and things. And every single day it gets better. It's hard to think how it's going to get better, but it clearly will get better, providing we keep delivering. Because I've got loads of really, really cool people that want to sort of find out about the company and support it, and it's amazing, really.
Yeah. I could only imagine as an entrepreneur, which I have been myself, listing your company on the stock exchange and then being the fastest growing company on the stock exchange, and also, which to me is very important, like there's some people, some of my maxi friends, I consider myself a Bitcoin maxi, toxic, against any type of scams and all that. There's some that are hating on LBEs. Funny enough, not from 2020 when Strategy started buying Bitcoin, but from last year when Strategy really started outperforming Bitcoin. Then it became a problem, which is funny. Maybe there's other reasons. Maybe you need to justify it to yourself that you didn't have that gain. I don't know, but it's truly.
Well, the reason why a company that adopts Bitcoin works is because Bitcoin is, without a doubt, I think we all agree, the very best asset in the world. So how can you get better than Bitcoin? Then, in my opinion, and some people will disagree with me, which is fine, you have Bitcoin that without basically compounds itself. So if you can have Bitcoin, and it can effectively outperform Bitcoin, not in fiat terms, but in terms of more Bitcoin per share effectively, then providing you've invested in a good management team, then obviously there's more risk to that than pure Bitcoin, but people can decide. Like I hold Bitcoin, I hold Smarter Web Company. They're built on the same thing effectively, in a lot of ways, because our treasury is deployed into Bitcoin, but they're different things. But one of them, all being well, will have far superior performance to the other because it's built into the business model that it will compound. So when I explain to my kids, about investing and saving and things, it's all about compound interest, and
So important.
Compound Bitcoin. What more can we say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess the thing I wanted to get to before, like, not only is it obviously financially exciting, but to me, LBEs help bring about hyper Bitcoinization and the end of dirty, evil central banking. So your success, Strategy's success, Metaplanet's success, etc., is good for humanity the way I see it. So I'm surprised when someone has an issue with it, and but that was partly the reason I started doing shows on this, because there's a need for education, I would say, but it's exciting. You're helping humanity, well, Andrew, and you're making a lot.
Well, if you think about it, so think about the UK right now. So I don't know how much of the UK holds Bitcoin, but let's say it's 10%. Yeah. Just it's probably something like that, but I don't actually know. So let's say we get into the FTSE 100, and then tracker funds have to buy our stock because they don't have a choice. They have to reflect the indices. So if we achieve that mission, almost everyone in the country will indirectly hold Bitcoin. So if you don't love Bitcoin treasury companies, that's cool, but you perhaps need to credit like those companies. So take Saylor in the States, for example, with the S&P and NASDAQ. I believe they might be in the S&P now. I'm not sure, but they were in the NASDAQ from January, I think.
They were included in QQQ, which is like a NASDAQ top 100 end of last year, and S&P is decision, I believe, is end of this month, because that's the end of Q2. If Bitcoin stays above, I don't know, 100,000, they should be included, but it's still a qualitative decision, but they should be included. And that, yeah, so that's the status. But I mean, I expect it as an investor.
Yeah, it's pretty cool though, isn't it? Because that means that, even if you don't like Bitcoin, you're gonna own it.
And we are forcing you to take this fire insurance. You want to have all your wealth and savings in a dangerous system where you buy ETFs, and to be more safe, we're going to put some fire insurance into that, because we think the house is burning down, and we want you to have some fire insurance. So that's good. I think strategy I think when Saylor last shared the numbers, I believe they had around 900,000 individual shareholders, but I think the numbers were that around 55 million people had indirect ownership of strategy through QQQ, but also there's a bunch of smaller world index funds. And since Bitcoin is growing, LBs are growing faster. And so everyone will benefit in the end. But if you want to benefit a little bit more, you need to take ownership individually of some LBE stocks. And that's why I'm here. I love to talk about them and look at who's doing well. And you're killing it, Andrew. So that's awesome. What else haven't we covered that you think would be really important, or that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I'd like to just sort of say is, how grateful we are to the community that supported us. We're doing this for all of us. And it's, when the days are quite long and you see all that, great support, it does make everything, sort of, easier, really. So, that's the main thing that I'd like to say, that, just to say to, everyone, it doesn't matter whether you've bought, 1 or 2 shares in us, or you've bought loads of shares in us, like every one of those people that supported us, has helped to make this possible for all of us. And, I'm, truly grateful for that. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that, have, benefited from, the success that we've delivered to date. And then hopefully that success will keep going and going and going. And then, more people can benefit from that. So I'd just like to say thank you. Really.
Yeah, no, it's you definitely have a lot of support, and it's a fast growing community. Like, I had to tell you, you were like double the size and X than you were aware of yourself. That's awesome. That's good news, because you're busy doing that. You're busy doing the work, and raising the capital and buying the Bitcoin. So right now, I guess it's similar to ATM, right? You're raising. Wait, another question that I need to have answered. What is your MNAV right now, if you know, with today's price and Bitcoin on balance sheet? What would that?
Yeah, so I haven't updated it since earlier today. When I looked at it earlier today, the share price was lower. And it was around about 10 actually. But when we look at it internally, we calculate our MNAV based on the cash and the Bitcoin we've got, because when you've got cash that's still waiting to be deployed, because every country is different, but in the UK the way it works is you get the money a couple of days after the raise completes. So, it isn't like you do a raise and that second later, the money's all in the bank ready to go. It doesn't take long, but it does take a little bit of time. So if you were doing this in the purest sense of the word, you wouldn't include cash in your MNAV, but we include cash in our MNAV because we're in the early stages, and cash can be it doesn't last for long, the cash, because we deploy it very aggressively, but it's important to factor it into it for our own internal purposes. But we believe that we're sort of getting it deployed, sort of as quickly as we can, with an element of responsibility, is probably the best way of putting it.
Right. And so would MNAV, like I've seen some numbers that, they're obviously not updated, but MNAV ballpark 10, would that be the area around that you would be at, or?
Yeah, that would be about right. Obviously as we raise, so if you look at the raises that we've done in the past, we've raised money and then we've reset the MNAV right down, and then it's bounced back up again. There was one thing that you said a minute ago, which I just wanted to clarify, which is, with the raises that we've done today, they've been, we call them as accelerated book builds in the UK. So they are different to an ATM. An ATM is what you get in the States, where you're effectively selling the shares to the market and the market participants. So in the UK, most people, what they do is they do an equity raise. So you call it an ABB or a placing or a wrap offer, something like that. They're all pretty much the same thing. We're it's slightly different because you've got someone there that may hold the shares, or they may sell the shares, but there's a third party there. But there's different solutions that you can do for the different things, and obviously I can't say much more about those right now.
No, of course, I know that you're limited in what you can disclose before it goes to the stock exchange. Wait, let me just see if I have some other questions. I know early on in the journey as an LB, then it's mainly issuing shares one way or another, like either ATM or the way you're doing it. What about other tools? Is that something? Yeah, it's just natural later in the process, or it's not the right thing to do this early, right?
Yeah, so every company's got to do what they believe is right with their strategy. So our strategy, which we can see has worked quite well, has been to do it as we've done it. You could take a debt portion on alongside that. I believe that we're still a little bit too small for that. I think when you get to a certain size, it's a good way of doing it. We've had multiple offers from different people who want to give us different funding solutions. Some of those we've continued talking about. Some of them we've gone back to them and we've said not at this stage. Other ones we've said not on those terms. My job as the CEO is to get the right capital at the right terms for the business with the right structure. As you see us grow over the coming weeks and months, you'll see us do different things, and it's my job to try and do the right things at the right time. I believe that I've got a pretty good plan of what I'm going to do at the different stages, and hopefully everyone can see from what they've seen me do so far that I've done a sort of a good job of it so far, and all I can do is I can promise that I will continue to do my best, and I believe that my strategy is very sensible, whilst very ambitious at the same time.
I love it. I'm here for the ride. I'm looking forward to it. And you say something I think that is crucial. People have to look at what you've done, and you guys have killed it so far. And that's what builds credibility in future performance of execution. That's one of the reasons that I and others invested in Metaplanet have a lot of faith in Simon and Dylan is the flawless execution. So also as an investor, we are approaching now 8 CT. We've been going almost for an hour. I do want to respect your, your private time because I know you're super busy. So, but one last thing maybe. As an investor, I also look at the size of the economy in the country, because people tend to buy local products, local investments, and that's why US obviously is very big. So is strategy. Japan is the second largest economy in the world. So I believe, all right, the ceiling is high for Metaplanet. They can grow very far. And UK also is a big country, a big economy. How big exactly is UK as in terms of the economy?
Yeah, the UK is one of the biggest in the world. So clearly it's not a patch on the US in terms of the size. We've got about, I don't know, a fifth of the people that you've got in the US. But the economy in the UK is one of the biggest in the world. So like, funnily enough, that was all part of why I wanted to do this, that I wanted to do something in my home country. And I felt that, we've, maybe not so much in recent years, but we've done a lot of good things in the UK, in the hundreds and hundreds of years that we've been around. And the UK is a very, very big economy, one of the biggest in the world. And I wanted to do something from the UK because I believe that people from the UK would, as you say, buy local. But that's not to say that we haven't. I'm amazed, pleasantly amazed with the global support as well. I get messages from all over the world asking for how people can buy our stock in different jurisdictions, and we're working on those plans as well. I know it's not as easy as it could be in certain countries right now, but we are working on that as well. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see, and they only see it when the announcements come out and all that sort of stuff, or maybe occasionally if I say something that I shouldn't. Yeah, it's one of the biggest countries in the world, and British people, like everyone else in the world, they are proud of the country. And if we take my American friends, for example, they like the UK as well. So we get a bit of a bad rep in the UK. We can be a bit miserable at times, and
the weather.
the last few years.
I'm from Denmark. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. The weather's not nice necessarily.
Yeah. But it's just amazing to see something that brings so many people together, because we need something that is getting everyone excited, and so far everyone seems to be quite excited.
Absolutely. You said that very calmly, but we're all very excited. It's an exciting time to be alive. I'm grateful to be part of Bitcoin taking over as money of the world, and then also comes along LBs, which just is intellectually stimulating and exciting. Andrew, so much for taking the time of coming on. I appreciate it. Yeah, you're so busy these days. You probably want to go and or should go and prioritize family a little bit. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome.
Yeah, nice likewise. Nice to get to know you. And I hope we get to drink a pint together sometime when you come to a Bitcoin conference. Awesome.
For sure.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching. 873 live viewers currently, split between my X account and the YouTube account, which by the way is at Two Christians Walk Into a Bar. There you have it. None of this is financial advice. It's strictly financial entertainment, maybe some information, and you got to do your own research before you buy anything, and it's your own responsibility. So think about that. Thank you for watching, everyone. Once again, Andrew, thank you so much. And I will say good night to everyone. Bye for now. See you in the next one.